Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really big one, something affecting so many people, particularly younger folks.
Yeah, the whole social media and mental health connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Its impact on well-being. We've been looking at this great discussion from the Learn English podcast on YouTube.
Right, they break down the research in a really sort of conversational way, very accessible.
Yeah, super helpful. So our mission here is to pull out the key insights, how these platforms affect us, what we can maybe do about it, but without getting too lost in the weeds, academically speaking.
Sounds good. It's definitely a topic where the understanding seems to be shifting almost constantly.
It really does. So the discussion we looked at kicks off with this story about a girl named Emma, 15 years old.
Oh, yeah, I remember that example. Very relatable, unfortunately.
Totally. She starts off, happy, active, but then she gets sucked into spending 5, 6 hours a day scrolling social media, Instagram mostly.
And the change was noticeable, right? More withdrawn, grades dropping, feeling down, that comparison trap.
Exactly. And it's a pattern I think many listening might recognize, maybe in themselves or someone they know.
And that personal story, it kind of mirrors these bigger, quite worrying statistics that the source highlighted.
Yeah, talk about those.
Well, between 2010 and 2021, which is pretty much the smartphone and social media boom era,
Right.
they saw like a 60% jump in teen depression rates. And for teenage girls specifically, a 30% rise in suicide rates.
Wow. That's stark.
It is. And while, correlation isn't causation, you can't just ignore that parallel timing. It's alarming.
Definitely something demanding a closer look. And then, of course, the pandemic threw fuel on the fire, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The source mentioned this U.S. report from 2021. I think it said an 81% increase in teen screen time.
81%.
Yeah. Because suddenly social media wasn't just, an option. It became the main connection point for so many kids stuck at home.
Which probably amplified some of the existing issues, right? More time spent in those potentially curated, sometimes negative spaces during a really stressful period.
Exactly. More exposure, more comparison, maybe more isolation despite the connection.
And they also brought up Zoom fatigue. That kind of ties in, doesn't it?
It does, that weird exhaustion you feel just from staring at a screen, even if you're sitting still.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just video calls, it's the constant input, managing how you appear online.
Mm.
It's draining.
And that ties into another habit they mentioned, checking the phone first thing in the morning, last thing at night. So many of us do that.
Oh, for sure. And the issue there is really about sleep.
Right, the blue light.
Exactly. That bright light tells your brain, hey, it's daytime, which suppresses melatonin, the sleep hormone.
You're basically messing with your body's natural clock.
You are. Scrolling right before bed or as soon as you wake up disrupts that circadian rhythm.
Right.
And poor sleep, well, that directly links to mood issues, energy levels, the works.
Okay, so that's the context. But the source also went into the actual, the teenage brain itself, which was fascinating.
Yeah, the half-baked brownie analogy they used.
Yeah, still cooking, right?
Pretty much. The key part is the prefrontal cortex.
Okay, what does that do again?
It's crucial. Handles things like decision-making, controlling emotions, thinking about future consequences. Basically, the brain's CEO.
And it's not fully developed in teens?
Not even close. It keeps maturing until like the mid-20s, around age 25.
Okay, so that explains some of the impulsivity maybe, like posting something without thinking it through.
Precisely. That ability to really weigh long-term outcomes isn't fully online yet. It's not a character flaw, it's just brain development.
That makes a lot of sense. And they also said teens feel emotions more intensely and are really tuned into peers.
Yeah, hugely. Their emotional responses are stronger, and that need for social validation, for fitting in, is biologically wired at that age. It's not weakness, it's just how the wiring works then.
Which makes them potentially more vulnerable to the ups and downs of social media, like seeking likes or feeling left out.
Exactly. Those things can feel incredibly high stakes when your brain prioritizes social feedback so strongly.
Now, the discussion also pointed out differences between how girls and boys might be affected. It seems girls often feel the impact more strongly.
Yeah, the research tends to suggest that. A big factor seems to be social comparison, especially around appearance.
Right, Instagram particularly.
Mhm. That endless feed of curated, often filtered photos, they called it the scroll of doom.
Oof, yeah.
It creates this constant pressure to compare yourself to these often unrealistic standards.
And what about the relationship aspect?
Well, the source suggested girls often place a really high value on relationships and social connection. So things like feeling excluded online or not getting enough likes or comments can hit harder. It taps into that core need for connection.
Okay, and what about boys? Are they just immune?
No, definitely not immune, but the impact might show up differently, maybe more around gaming addiction or getting into online arguments, cyberbullying, expressing anger online,
Mm,
different manifestations perhaps.
gotcha. So different vulnerabilities. Okay, let's shift focus to the platforms themselves. The source said they each have their own sort of
Mhm.
traps.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They're not all the same.
So Instagram, we mentioned the land of perfect photos,
Yeah.
linked to body image issues, comparison, depression.
Right. That pressure to project perfection.
Then there's TikTok. They
Mhm.
called it tricky, fun, addictive, but that algorithm.
Oh, that algorithm is powerful. It learns what you like so fast and feeds you those quick dopamine hits with short videos.
It keeps you hooked.
Keeps you hooked, but it can also, lead you down strange paths. You start watching puppy videos and somehow end up seeing harmful content or misinformation because the algorithm just wants to keep you engaged, sometimes at any cost.
Yeah, that's concerning. And Snapchat, they mentioned streaks.
Ah, the streaks. Yeah. Turning daily communication into this, numbers game.
That sounds stressful.
It can be. Huge anxiety around not breaking the streak. It makes connection feel performative, almost like a chore instead of genuine interaction. And TikTok has similar pressures now, too.
And Facebook, maybe less used by teens now, but the underlying principle is the same, right? Keep scrolling.
Fundamentally, yes. They all want your attention. And a key mechanism for that is something called variable rewards.
Okay, explain that. Variable rewards.
Think of a slot machine. You pull the lever, sometimes you win big, sometimes small, sometimes nothing. It's unpredictable.
Right.
Social media notifications work similarly. You refresh your feed, maybe there's a great post, lots of likes, a nice comment, maybe nothing much. That unpredictability, that chance of a reward, is incredibly compelling for our brains. It keeps us checking, keeps us scrolling, hoping for that next little hit.
Wow. So it's literally designed to be addictive, like gambling.
In a way, yes, it leverages that same psychological principle, and the source brought up the Facebook
Yeah,
files,
the leaks.
showing that Meta, Facebook's parent company, they knew about some of these negative impacts, especially on teen girls.
But prioritized engagement anyway.
The implication was that fixing it might hurt engagement, which hurts the bottom line.
Right.
It really highlights that these aren't just neutral tools, they're engineered environments designed to capture attention.
Okay, so that's the design aspect. Let's get into uh, the cold, hard science, as the source put it. What does the large-scale data show?
Well, that University of San Diego study was pretty eye-opening. They looked at over 200,000 teenagers
Okay.
and found that kids spending over 5 hours a day on electronic devices, they were 71% more likely to have risk factors for suicide, like suicidal thoughts or behaviors.
71%.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
It really is. It strongly suggests a link between very high usage and serious mental health risks.
And what about looking across different cultures? Jonathan Haidt's research.
Yeah, that was interesting. Haidt found the impact isn't necessarily the same everywhere.
How so?
In places with strong, real-world safety nets, close families, strong school communities, things like that, the negative effects seemed less severe.
Okay.
But in more individualistic cultures, where maybe online life takes up more social space, the impact seemed harsher. It suggests our offline support systems can act as a kind of buffer.
That makes sense. The real world matters. But getting good data is hard, right? Source mentioned that.
It's a major challenge. The tech companies hold most of the detailed data on user behavior and how specific features affect people. Researchers often don't have full access.
Which is where whistleblowers like Frances Haugen come in.
Exactly. Her leaks provided a rare peek inside, showing, for example, that Instagram's own research indicated harm to teen girls' body image.
And the allegation was that fixing it wasn't the top priority because it might mean fewer people using the app.
That was the concern raised, yeah. That potential conflict between protecting users and maximizing profit or engagement. It raises big questions about transparency and corporate responsibility.
Definitely. So given all this evidence, what's actually being done? What are the potential solutions? The source mentioned government action.
Yes, there's movement on that front. In the U.S., there's the proposed Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA. The idea is to make platforms assess risks to kids and give researchers better data access.
Okay.
Europe already has the Digital Services Act, which demands more transparency about algorithms and how content is moderated.
Right.
And California passed an age-appropriate design code, basically telling companies they have to consider kids' best interests when designing products.
So regulation is starting to happen. What about parents in schools? They call them digital bodyguards.
I like that term. Yeah, parents and educators play a huge role. There are parental control apps, Bark, Custodio, Apple Screen Time that can help monitor and manage usage.
Hmm.
And movements like Wait Until 8th, encouraging parents to hold off on smartphones until kids are a bit older, maybe 8th grade or so, giving them more time to develop first.
And education itself, digital literacy.
Crucial. Finland was highlighted for its national program teaching kids critical thinking skills online, how to spot fake news, evaluate sources, use tech responsibly. We need more of that everywhere.
Absolutely. And what about support for kids who are already struggling?
Access to mental health support is key. School-based health centers can make counseling easier to get. And some universities, like Stanford, are even offering digital wellness classes.
So building awareness and providing resources. Okay, looking ahead, the source actually sounded, maybe surprisingly, a bit optimistic.
Yeah, there's a sense that awareness is growing. People are talking about the downsides more openly, and there are efforts to find kinder solutions. Like what? Well, some apps experimenting with hiding, like, counts, to
Yeah.
reduce that pressure, limiting endless scrolling, adding reminders to take a break, drink water, touch grass, that sort of thing.
Yeah, gentle nudges.
Exactly. There's also talk about using AI, potentially, to help detect harmful content or even signs of depression in user behavior, though that raises its own privacy questions, of course.
Sure. And governments are looking at safety checks, like for food or medicine.
That's being discussed. Treating platforms more like products that need to meet certain safety standards before release, maybe with age limits based on brain science.
And that radical idea, a screen time tax.
Yeah, that's definitely thinking outside the box. Incentivizing platforms to value our time rather than just maximizing the time we spend on them. A big shift.
It really would be. Okay, so wrapping this up, the main takeaway from this deep dive seemed to be that social media isn't inherently evil, but it's powerful.
Very powerful. And it can negatively impact mental health, especially for young people, if we're not conscious about how we use it.
And for anyone listening who feels that pressure, that comparison, that overwhelm, the source had a really important message.
Yeah. You're not weird. You're not broken. You're human. And you are definitely not alone in feeling this way. These platforms are designed to affect us.
Absolutely. So if you're struggling, please reach out. Talk to someone, a friend, parent, teacher, counselor. Don't go it alone.
And sometimes small changes help, too.
Right. Just putting the phone down for a bit, stretching, going outside, hugging a pet, calling someone instead of texting.
Little lacks of offline connection.
Exactly. Well, thank you for digging into this with us. It's a lot to think about.
Definitely is. Thanks for listening.
And we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. As technology keeps weaving itself deeper into our lives, how can each of us actively, consciously reshape our relationship with it to put our well-being and genuine human connection back at the center?